Okay, good afternoon, good morning, Jim, for you on behalf of the scientific committee and the organizers. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and muy buenas tardes a todos y buenas noches. I will introduce you, Jim, in Spanish briefly, and after that you can talk, you can start your talk.
Okay.
Voy a presentar muy brevemente a Jim G. Yo creo que Jim G, como los grandes pensadores, de hecho, y tenemos referentes cercanos a nuestro ámbito como Jean Piaget, como Lev Vygotsky, como Jerome Bruner, como Uli Bronfenbrenner, Michael Tomasello actualmente, pues se pregunta actualmente por la condición humana. De hecho, su último libro del año pasado se llama What is a Human Language, Mind and Culture? Y resume gran parte de lo que es sus desarrollos y sus aportaciones contemporáneas. De hecho, tenemos un artículo conjunto en el 2019, publicado en Comunicar, en el que precisamente nuestra tesis era que para mejorar la comprensión del ser humano es necesario para poder implementar procesos de cambio tecnológico, de intervención educativa y de diseño de lo que allá llamábamos aprendizaje profundo. Más formalmente, Jim G. es Mary Love Fulton Presidential Professor of Literacy Studies at the Arizona State University. Es miembro de la Academia Nacional de Educación de los Estados Unidos. Ha realizado contribuciones significativas, como muchos de vosotros y vosotras sabéis, que han abierto caminos y líneas de investigación nuevos en psicolingüística, en análisis del discurso. Es conocido su diferenciación de discurso en D mayúscula y discurso en D minúscula, en sociolingüística, en educación bilingüe, en videojuegos y aprendizaje, en nuevas alfabetizaciones, en la comprensión y análisis de la identidad y en los medios sociales y digitales, en conceptos tan populares como de affinity spaces. Jim G. nace en San José, en California. Recibe el bachelor en filosofía en la Universidad de California en Santa Bárbara y el máster y doctorado en lingüística en Stanford. Y empieza, de hecho, en la lingüística teórica, que va derivando tempranamente ya en trabajos sobre análisis del discurso, sociolingüística y aplicaciones, en particular de la lingüística, la alfabetización y la educación, adentrándose y siendo, de hecho, uno de los impulsores de la llamada New Literacies, que conciben, como sabéis, la lectura y escritura más allá de desempeños meramente cognitivos mentales, para considerarse prácticas sociales, culturales, con implicaciones económicas, históricas y políticas. Cabe recordar que su libro Sociolinguistics and Literacies, que muchos de vosotras y vosotros conoceréis, se considera, de hecho, uno de los textos fundacionales del ámbito interdisciplinar del New Literacy Studies, y más recientemente sugiere el análisis de los videojuegos, no tanto como herramientas de aprendizaje, el game learning, sino más bien como un contexto y una práctica de aprendizaje en sí misma que debe ser analizada, estudiada, para inspirar y entender cómo aprendemos las personas. De modo que qué principios subyacen a los videojuegos para que tengan un potencial mediador tan grande en los aprendizajes, sean de hecho fuentes de aprendizaje. En definitiva, la pregunta que da título al libro del 2003, What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Learning and Literacy, uno de los libros más citados y conocidos del autor. Y volviendo con lo que os decía, que es, yo creo, quizá la pregunta fundamental que se hace allí en la actualidad y que de hecho estoy seguro que hoy nos compartirá, sus últimos libros integran reflexiones y análisis de los procesos de alfabetización y aprendizaje en el mundo y sociedades contemporáneas. Buena muestra de ello es su libro Teaching, Learning, Literacy in Our High-Risk, High-Tech World, a Framework for Becoming Human del 2017, así como el anteriormente mencionado What is a Human Language, Mind and Culture? Thank you so much, Jim, again, for joining us. And please feel free to start your talk.
I'm glad to be here today. And what I want to talk about is what a human being is. And why I want to talk about that is lots of current research in a variety of areas, evolutionary biology, modern anthropology, neuroscience, a whole host of areas, is finally learning what human beings are. And it isn't what we thought. So what I want you to do, since you're interested in literacy and education, what I want you to do is, throughout this talk, ask, when I tell you what a human being is like, ask yourself, is that the creature we're teaching in school? Are we teaching human beings as they are, or some vision of human beings that is quite different from what we are? You know, I'm retired now. I live on a farm. I have animals. If you wanted to teach a donkey, or you wanted to interact with a donkey, you better know what a donkey is, right? Because if you don't know what a donkey is, the donkey won't be pleased, and probably you won't be. So I want you to think of whether or not you think the way schools are organized is teaching human beings. Now, I want to just get you to do one little thing so that something I'm later going to say will be clear. You guys are big on soccer, I think. So I want you in your head to imagine a soccer game, people playing soccer. Just see the image in your head of people playing soccer. Do the teams have a certain color? Just, you know, and see if you can do this. See if you can put yourself into the game in your head. Can you see yourself score a goal? Okay, that capacity that you're doing, if you're doing this, is what I'm going to call your ability to simulate. You can make simulations. You can make virtual worlds in your head. So it is a core capacity of humans. Sometimes we call that capacity not simulation, but imagination. And one of the purposes of this talk is to say that capacity to simulate is what education should be about, growing that capacity. Now, let me start the talk in earnest. You know, all of modern psychology says and agrees that human beings learn from experience. But if people can't really believe that, it's absolutely true, because, you know, they never tell us what experience is. They just say you have experiences. But what is an experience? If we learn from experience, you would think that the study of experience would be at the forefront of psychology and education. Now, experience is just sensation, right? Experience is you walk around the world or media, and your senses are turned on. And then, so the first thing we'd say, the most important subject matter, if you really believe humans learn from experience, the most important thing would you study sensation. And you would not study it in a laboratory one sense at a time. Because the way sensation works in a human being is all of your senses are pooled. You take in information in ensembles of integrated sensation from the world, and you couple them with internal feelings and emotions. The nature of human sensation, except if you're just staring at a screen, is to couple your internal feelings and bodily senses and emotions with outer sensations of the world, and to integrate them. That coupling is what allows all living creatures, us too, to keep adapting to the world. Well, if we ever uncouple from the world, we're dead. We have to get things in the world and give things back to the world. So that's what sensation is. It is an adjustment moment by moment of the self and its internal well-being and the world that it senses. And the world changes us, we change the world. So if learning from experience is the way humans learn, then we would be studying sensation. And if we're going to study sensation, we'd be studying the way living creatures, including humans, couple with their world, and in the act make that world and adapt to the world. It's a dance between self and world. Well, again, none of this, I don't know anything in education that studies this. Now, here, the next point is this: is the way humans are built is as they do this coupling, this moving in the world, in the midst of the world, they that activates neurons, whole ensembles of neurons that connect. right? You see a bird, a babbling brook, you're in bed. All that is just activating networks and networks of neurons that represent all the associations and patterns you're seeing in experience, right? The human mind does have some innate connections, but basically the human mind is built from sensation by the fact that sensation activates networks of neurons that come to represent for us associations of things in the world, patterns. And so literally sensation builds your mind. Now, the interesting thing about the way the mind works is that these networks of neurons that represent the associations you have seen in the world, like, you know, that house benches are brown with the red on them and that they flock and they're near, all those associations that have been activated by experience can be reactivated in your mind. You just did it with the soccer game. What you did with the soccer game is you took all the neurons that represent associations of soccer, which are many, ensembles of neurons connected in various strengths in various ways. And instead of having them activated by the world, you took them and you activated them yourself in your mind. And that's what I called simulating. And you can do more than this, because when you simulate, you can either activate the connections in your brain that represent what you've seen in the world, the felt in the world, the sensed in the world, or you can mix and match it. You can create fantasies by taking part of this and part of that and create a bird that, you know, a pig, for example, that flies, right? You could create that soccer game and have a donkey walk out on this. See, so that capacity, there is no real difference between sensation, which is activating these associations in your head, and imagination, where they're activating in the theater of your mind. They're the same neurons. Okay, so I'm having to keep turning on my notes here. Now, this web of associations in your head, right, that has come from experience, we've just seen you can use it to imagine. But basically, you use it for everything. So you can use it to remember. Remembering just means you imagine with a time and place. Imagination means you mixed and match. You use the activation of neurons to think, to reason. So, for example, let's say you associate house finches with being gray and with having red on their breast if they're a male, and having a thick beak. And all of a sudden, you know, you've got a very strong set of association because you've seen thousands of house finches if you're in America. And all of a sudden, one day you see a bunch of house finches, and one of them looks just like all the other house finches. But instead of having little red patches, it has yellow patches. Now what's going to happen in your head? You're going to activate all your house finch associations, and then you're going to get a contradiction, because that includes red, and now your eyes have activated yellow. So what are you going to do? You have to hypothesize and put possibly there are yellow ones, but they're rare. Now, that's just thinking, right? You're using the same imagination, and now you know you've got this one, and it's only tentatively linked, weakly associated with house finches, but you keep seeing him with them, and then pretty soon you've got yellow or red. Yellow's rare. My point I'm trying to make to you is that in modern theories of the mind, there is no essential difference between imagining, dreaming, sensing, and thinking. It's done with the same part of your brain, the ability to simulate. And therefore, weirdly, the idea in cognitive science that cognition is a separate capacity, somehow higher than sensation and emotion, is wrong. There is no such cognition, imagination, dreaming, sensation are just different tasks you do with this, and memory with the same mental apparatus, which is associations from experience. And by the way, even though we can use these neurons to do memory or recall, humans are not very good at that, because they primarily use their simulation capacities even if they're based on a memory, even to prepare for the future. Human memory is more orientated to the future than the past. We use it to plan and to think before we act. So school seems to be about cognition, that is teaching people facts and information. But in fact, humans are no good with that. They are good at simulating, and they are most prepared to simulate to plan for the future rather than to recall the past. So remember, school seems to be about recall, the one thing humans are bad at and don't really need. So now, there is an implication from this that's pretty serious. If sensation, which is the melding and coupling of you and the world, inner and outer, is the foundation of your mind because it brings the associations through which you simulate, which means you imagine, remember, reason, whatever you do, then your experiences, which your central experiences in life, are the limit of your brain, right? Your brain is no better or worse than the experiences you've had. And that means that all of us have had limited experiences, right? And so all of us have limited minds, and all of us can only grow if we have new experiences. And if sometimes they change our old associations if they're not working, right? So we would say that school should be about what I would call world repair. That is, repairing your web of associations in your brain is your model of the world. That's your viewpoint on the world, the big model of the world you have. And if it's no good, it's not good for planning. It's not good for having a future. So school ought to be about repairing associations that are not working for you, giving you new experiences that will expand your mind and make better associations. It's about mind building, world building, building this model of the world that you have. Now, some people then say, well, but you're saying, Jim, it's all about sensation, but what about words? What about symbols and math? I mean, isn't school really about symbols and signs, not about babbling brooks and sense and smell and vision and coupling with the world? Well, this is only believed because we have a wretched view of language, and we linguists are responsible for this. A word is a sign. So let's take the word democracy. And so people think, well, it has an abstract meaning. Sometimes they call it a definition. And in fact, it has no such thing. All a word is a cue to say, in context, what associations in this context that you have experienced with democracy can you use to make meaning of what the person just said? Right? All it is said, start activating, simulating in your mind, which you can only do based on what experiences you've had in the world with democracy. What could they mean here and now when they say something like one-click democracy? Right? So it's still associations. All signs is kind of a guide or cue to say, get associating here, but do it relevant to context. So there is no such thing as just purely verbal, abstract thinking. By the way, the implication of this for school is that if you've got a book, a textbook, and that book is words, and those words are telling you in the context of what this book is about, really fill these words up with associations from experience, and you have had no experiences in that area, let's say geology, then it's absolutely meaningless to you. See, so it would be immoral to hand somebody a set of symbols that are cues to associate when he has no experience with which to associate anything with it, right? But we do it all the time. So, some kids have played around with science, and we give them science books. They have lots of associations they've got from experience. They fill up the words with meaning, and other kids don't. We pretend we gave them the same thing, namely a book, and that they were equal. It's bad theory of language. All we've got is our human capacity to assimilate in our minds based on experience, and therefore all limited by our experiences. So let's get, if this is how humans, well, but let me add one thing to it, because, so the other thing that we've discovered is, again, I told you schools are big on cognition, what people know can recall. And I've said that that's just a function of imagination, of simulation, and therefore completely contingent on how many experiences of what sort you have had. But cognition has another big mistake. We think that cognition is our high power and emotions and feeling are somehow lower. But we know now from just enormous amount of research that emotion and feeling guide thinking, not the other way around, right? If you want to think about something or reason or plan, what happens is emotion and feeling they tell you have a need to do this. You feel a certain way, you have a certain emotion, it says you got to do some work, you got to solve a problem. There's a problem or there's something good and you want to keep it going. So the first thing is they trigger you to think or learn. Without them, you're not triggered. Why do anything if you're happy, right? I mean, the emotion says you got to change something for the better or worse, or to keep something. If you have nothing to change, you're perfectly satisfied. You never learn anything. So then, though, when you act, the emotion also assesses that action. If the emotion is bad and gets worse, that wasn't a good thing to do. If you act and the emotion gets better, that was a good thing to do. So emotions trigger thinking and acting, and they assess it. So, and without them, there's nothing. So, Descartes' famous cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, should really be I feel, I sense, therefore I am. Now, schools make cognition primary, but they do nothing about affect and emotion. And yet those are what would trigger learning and assess it, right? Now, the other thing as I move to school is we do know now how to measure physically whether a human being is flourishing or not. That is, we know that high levels of stress, trauma, anxiety actually give rise to chemicals in your blood that are very destructive of your organs, inflammation. And we can measure those stress hormones in your body. And if they're very high, we know that you are making yourself very unhealthy, but we also know that humans are built that if they have high levels of stress, they cannot learn anything new. They're so focused on the trauma that they have a narrow attention span and they can't learn. So we would also say there's no way, if you're in a school and your children have high levels of stress and anxiety, that is these stress hormones, not only are they making themselves unhealthy, but they couldn't possibly learn what you want them to do because they're focused on their trauma. And now studies have shown that the most depressed, anxious, and stress-filled society in the world is the United States. And that we know that huge numbers of children, especially poorer children, are going to school with tremendous amounts of stress hormones in their system, and we're trying to teach and test on them, right? When it has no possibility of working. So what's the solution? I'm going to argue to what I've just said is not studied much by anybody. It certainly isn't in schools of education. And it tells you that human beings, creatures of imagination based on sensation and experience, extremely sensitive to stress and trauma, and guided in thinking and action by emotion and feeling. That does not seem to be the creature schools of education are training teachers to teach. They might be a successful way to teach Martians by just recruiting a bunch of facts and information, but it is not a successful way to teach humans. So what would we do about it? Well, we go back to this thing. We are built to get experiences. They're usually guided by social groups. And those experiences fill up our head with webs of association that are our map of the world, our view of the world. And if that's limited, if our experiences have been extremely limited, or polarized into one group, then your model of the world isn't very useful for you to flourish. So what you need are what I call designed experiences. People, whether they're game designers, artists, media people, need to design experiences for you the way a parent would for a child. That is, create an experience, could be a video game, create a whole world. And in that, try to repair bad associations, build new ones, enhance, right? Now, it's just like a parent doesn't just send the kid out in the forest to get eaten, but actually designs the experience to be safe enough that the kid will survive, but experience good things and not bad things. For all of us adults, we need designed experience to make up for the limits of our mind. And that's what art is about. That's what good media is about, good games, is substituting for the kind of random experiences you get in the real world, depending on your wealth and your background, and giving people a much wider range of well-mentored, well-guided experiences. Great artists do that. And notice that good media people, good artists know that you only can do this if you trigger feeling and emotion, right? So if you look at art, it's all about how it triggers emotion, because then you've triggered the need for the person to work and think and redo their head. You'd never see this in school. My argument is teachers should be designers of experience. They should be designing experiences that recruit feeling and emotion to get people to want to solve problems and get new experiences, new capacities, new powers to simulate or imagine, particularly to imagine new and better futures. So to me, teachers are not treated this way, but they have the same role of artists and of media designers and of video game designers. They are there to design experience, to repair and enhance people's powers of imagination. And they have to know how humans work to do that. So that's the theory. I think that if you agree with any part of that theory, I'm arguing to you that it's well supported by current research, then we have a serious problem, and that is we're not teaching human beings in school. We might be torturing them, we're not teaching them. The other thing, though, I think, if you think about this theory long enough, you will say, well, that certainly explains why the world is so screwed up. Because all of our institutions are not built for humans. And when we keep pretending we are just higher order cognitive thinkers without emotion, and where we learn in abstractions that without sensation, then we're going to keep screwing this world up. And so what we need here is a whole new field. We need to redesign education as about designing experience. We need to integrate it with arts and media and games and stuff. So other experience designers, architects, and we need to realize humans are not thinkers, they're feelers and sensors. And when they feel and sense well, they enhance their capacity for imagination. And we also use imagination to think. All right, that's the end of that. I guess it was like, I don't know, was it an hour? I don't know. Is anybody there?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Well, it's over. The talk is over.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
How many people are at this conference?
I have no idea, Pilar. Maybe you know how many people we are?
You didn't collect any money? Oh.
Okay. Any reactions? Any
81
questions?
persons.
81 people.
81, good.
Yeah.
30.
So I'm wondering in the role, according to you, Jim, sorry, my kids, in the role of utopia in your thinking, right? Because if I understood well,
the role of what?
The role of utopia.
Utopia, yeah.
Utopia. Yes, because if I understood you well, you are seeing that school has to simulate better worlds.
Absolutely.
Say, right? Absolutely. So
humans are never going to be, so we don't want to build utopias. They're not possible. Every time any humans have tried to build utopias, they built horror shows. But the distance between how we live with each other now and utopia contains infinite states between that are better. So, but you're absolutely right. School should be about imagining better lives, worlds, relationships, but that can only be done by giving experiences, because you couldn't change the association without experiences. And you can't design a good experience if you haven't studied sensation. I just gave you there's a tremendous amount of work in sensation. You know, we normally get our knowledge about sensation from psych labs that study vision or study smell. There is no such thing as five senses. For human beings, there is a whole body is sensing as a whole body in a way that it crucially couples with the world. There's research on this, but if it's true, you say, well, I want to teach, I want that to make people better, then you got to change their associations, you got to give them experiences, and then you got to understand sensation. Now, do you know of any school of ed that has a course called Human Sensation 101? No. So they couldn't possibly be teaching humans, because minus sensations that are organized well and designed, your brain's a mess. And you can't solve it by saying, well, why don't you memorize these 10 facts? Because humans can't memorize facts unless they charge them with emotion and they enter the web of associations. And if the web of associations is crummy, so what? Your 10 facts entered a worldview that's municipal.
It involves a radical reform of the schools, right?
But radical reform of society and schools.
Society intentional. And open the schools to the other context of learning and the other context that
it means training teachers as experienced designers, right? That means they're going to have to be trained and have they're going to have the same training, but as a good artist, a good architect, a good game designer would. How do you give people? But they're also going to have to realize is that we have a lot of other designers of experience. They're part of a larger group, and that designed experiences exist throughout the society. So we got to stop separating them from the ones in school. So I'm proposing, it's not going to be me, I'm too old, some young people, I hope, that we need a whole new theory of education, we need a whole new theory of learning, and we need a whole new theory of schools, but not schools as schools, schools as integrated places, maybe even curators and aggregators of designed experiences across the board. The bad news is we've spent a long time with bad theories torturing children. The good news is for young scholars, we get out of business as usual. There is now exciting stuff by which you could do wholly new paths, and so there's always a silver lining. Not much of a silver lining for a 73-year-old, but for a younger one there is. We old people are people who screwed it up. So the young people will unscrew it up, and they're not going to unscrew it up if they keep doing business as usual. Imagine the phrase embodied cognition is used a lot, and yet almost all the modern literature on the body, of which is now big, you'd never know that that's what body meant in embodied cognition, right? It has nothing to do, body cognition seems to be just a single self who walks around in the world with a body. By the way, the human body doesn't exist. It's 50% to 90% of your cells are microorganisms, without which you would die. And if you don't have a good set of them, you're sick. So only 50% of your cells at best are human. And those cells all have parts that used to be other creatures, but incorporated into us. So when you're talking about, if you by human body mean only the human cells, then you're talking about a dead body because the microorganisms have died. Now we've only got human cells. So embodied cognition could only mean dead cognition. The living body is a system of multiple cells interacting with the environment constantly. And if it isn't interacting in a way that gets that those microorganisms to be multiple species and that are healthy, you're sick. You have diabetes, you have obesity and stuff. So the living body is not the same thing as a dead body. I've now come to see as a linguist, grammar is the theory of dead language. As a living thing, language is not about definitions or sets with well-defined features. It's about associations made from experience in context and negotiated with your interlocutor, with the people you're talking about. Our theories are about dead things. We now need to make them about living things.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I love your talk because I think you have like an humanistic life, an humanistic perspective of the world. And I was trying to go further to the school because we are now working on the media. And I feel like your ideas, and you were publishing before about the idea of embodiment. And I think you are going further from embodiment because you are going from embodiment to simulation and to imagination, and it goes further. But you know what I feel? That maybe when the teachers are teaching at the school, they are just teaching cognition, or they want to teach cognition. Even myself, I tried, my students think, but what the kids are, or the students or myself are learning outside the school is emotion. Yeah. And from my view, that is very strong, and that is very complicated, and I think this is dangerous. Because in that way, I think, for example, people is moving by emotion. And here in Spain, and you have that with the political people, the politicians are trying to combine people playing with emotion. At the school are not playing with emotion. This is one question. Maybe
you see good point, excellent point. The people say, Trump was a really aberrant thing. He wasn't at all, because Trump came in at a time where about 20 countries got kind of populist, nationalist, xenophobic, authoritarian leaders. Look at the guy in Turkey, the guy in Brazil, all over. He was everybody. We could go into why this happened. But you see, the thing about those guys, as they have in history, those sort of authoritarian types that appeal to nationalism, xenophobia, they understand how humans work better than our scholars. They know that only emotion, feeling, will rev you up to want to do work, to think or look or learn. And then they construct the sensations for you to make that work about othering and hating other people, right? They're very effective. We know it works, by the way. I mean, Trump got 50% of the people by teaching them they should hate immigrants and telling them, look at your experience in this rural town that has nothing but a dollar store, and you have no money, you've lost your jobs, all the things are overseas. And he's telling them, Black people did that to you. Government did that to you. And he's being told that, they're being told that by a Republican, when it was the Republicans who sent all the jobs overseas. That they know how to energize human beings, that humans are weak. They motivate their emotions. Humans have a very strong need to belong. So he says, if you join our team, you'll really belong. It'll make you feel like you're important. And it's a war. We're going to fight those Black people, or we're going to fight those government. So yes, these are manipulators who understand how humans work, as Hitler did, as other people did. And if we just keep letting those people learn how to motivate people, and we don't start motivating people by, for example, making the truth storied and embodied and central, then we're just going to go down the tubes, because we're right on the verge of a World War III, in the sense that the world is just where we were before World War I. Nation states fighting each other over stupid things like dignity. So yeah, absolutely. You know, I've argued this a couple of things. The bad guys are always better at this stuff than the good guys. I don't know why. They're better at technology. They're better at everything. I guess being evil is more motivating. I don't know, but we better step up our game.
Okay, and we have some question in Spanish here, and I will try to reorganize the question.
Sure.
The first one is people who is worried about how to put in practice these ideas when you are working with very different kind of people, and when we are working with minorities, and you know, they found that this may be difficult to put in practice these ideas. And I add that maybe for two reasons. One, because the kids are expecting other things from the school, and also because the teachers are not valuable. For them, emotions are not valuable, you know. This is one thing. And the second question that is very related to that one in some way, and also with the politics, is that maybe emotion have different levels. I don't know. I don't want to speak about levels, but think for that in that example. In Spain now we have a very complicated example, because in Madrid, a politician won the election because she said that the people is free because they can drink beer outside and they can go outside the home, you know, everything like this. This kind of emotion mobilize the people, you know, but these emotions are very elemental. And from my view, I don't know, this is complicated, because I will want to create emotion like related to art, but I think popular culture is also very interesting. And I don't want to put away this simple emotion. I think every emotion is important. I don't know. I am living in a contradiction, because I love this small emotion also. I don't think we don't need to speak all the time about Velázquez or Cervantes, you know?
Right. Well, you know, of course, Cervantes creates tremendous emotion. People love Don Quixote, right? He's everybody's hero. When he goes to fight the windmills, he's just got us, he owns us. You know, at least males feel that way. First of all, you know, we're talking about a paradigm change. We're not talking about school reform, because school reform has never worked. And so this paradigm change will happen slowly, bottom up. You get teachers together who begin to learn more about the sensations, and so all this stuff is available. You get them, you know, doing it where they can, or at least showing kids good media, good art, good science that's about embodiment and experience. You start bottom up, you start small. You're not going to see the whole thing. You cannot reform the school system, because the system, now I'm going to be talking about America. I don't know how yours works, but I know how ours works. The school system, Americans, when they say they want to reform it, say they wanted to make it better for children to learn, all children to learn. The trouble is the system is extremely simple at what it's doing. About learning. It's about what economists call signaling to the market. It is signaling which kids will be conscientious employees. And that is a very big economic function. You know, if you had 1,000 employees and everyone was a free thinker, you wouldn't get anything done. So the capitalist business is, I want to know whether these people are going to follow orders, be conscientious, show up on time. As far as what they need to learn, all the evidence shows they learn it on the job. So the system is perfectly fine for what the society wants it to do. And it is also owned by stakeholders making tremendous money, booksellers and digital stuff, text with governments, politicians. And so the stakeholders, they're not going to get out. It's why we still have oil. The stakeholders are not going to get out. You have to undermine it bottom up. And you have to say little victories will later ramify to big victories. We'll never get to a big victory if we don't start doing little. So what I want to see is guerrilla warfare. Do it at the edges. Integrate out in a school. Get teachers meeting together. Then show kids that they think the school's about the test, but here I'm going to give you an experience and you're going to know the knowledge, but have had a much deeper experience. You're going to say, well, the knowledge is fine, but the way you taught it and the test is stupid because I had nothing to experience. I couldn't put anything with the words. But now about emotion. Obviously, emotions can be destructive or not, and people are very confused. Here's the definition of emotions that I use. Feelings are your body. At every moment, you are feeling your body. As much of what's going on in your body, like your blood pressure right now, you are not aware of. The body is measuring your blood pressure, but you don't know it. But any of the internal feelings, if let's say all of a sudden your heart started to race, you felt your muscles tightening up and you began to get hot. You feel that. Those are bodily feelings. And bodily feelings are there, either whether you're aware of them or not, to get your body to monitor itself so it can stay alive. It's crucial. Now, here's what an emotion is. An emotion is an interpretation of those feelings. So you're in a context and you're getting warm and your muscles are tensing up and your heart is racing. And in that context, you interpret, you say, I'm angry. That's the emotion. So emotion is an interpretation of the context. Now, once you've interpreted it as anger, and the feeling you're feeling is now called anger. Your experiences in life will tell you how to respond. So let's say your experiences tell you I should punch the person in front of me. That's how it works. Now, if you want to design an experience, you could do it. First of all, you could get the person to have those sort of bodily feelings and interpret it differently, or to interpret it as anger, but to give them new associations that give them better ways to deal with it, right? But the human is built to constantly monitor their own body and to keep interpreting, am I in a good state or a bad state? And if they're in a bad state, they want to make it better. If they're in a good state, they want to sustain it. And that's the thing you are using. So there are sorts of strengths and levels of emotion. And emotion, anger can be good or bad, right? So again, a person who's had only experience that anger means you should lash out needs some design experience that says maybe anger needs you to go imagine a way to plan to make things better, right? So, but the humans are the way they are, right? And a human, I'll tell you this, all humans are built that if they feel unsafe, if they feel unsafe, this stress comes out, the hormones come out. If it's there too long, it begins to destroy their organs. When a human feels unsafe, they are profoundly dangerous, right? They've got a narrow vision. They're going to flee or fight. And so leaving, like the United States, large numbers of people with trauma and stress is going to lead to violence. Guess what? We have innumerable gun violence every day, much worse than the COVID because more people have been stressed. So at a societal level, leaving people with narrow models of the world or with very traumatic stress and anxiety, depression is very dangerous, very dangerous. And so it behooves us for our own safety. Now, there's an interesting study that people who feel unsafe or feel that there's pollution around them, if given a set of political questions, will answer them in a very right-wing way. But if you make that person feel safe or put them in a setting where they feel safe and they don't feel things are dirty or polluted, they answer the same questions as liberals. That right and left wing are actually different orientations. The sort of right wing is an orientation of fear and a fear of impurity and needing authority to protect you. And the more liberal one is how people behave when they feel safe, because then when we feel safe, we trust each other. So, that would say in America, if liberals wanted to win, they ought to do something to make people feel safe, because Americans don't feel safe. At any rate, that's the best I can say. But those were very good questions. But look, I'm saying we're on the verge of a new paradigm. We're going to discover for the first time what humans are. We're going to discover that our bad view of humans that we've used in school hurts kids. We're also going to discover it's why the world is screwed up, and we got to start to do something about it. And it most certainly in little communities, because bottom up. With global climate change stuff, the best thing you could do is try to implement this stuff in local areas, whether it's your classroom or something, because look, I mean, you can't change the world, but you can vastly change the world of those kids.
Oh, thank you so much. I am very happy listening to you that the idea that I like the most is that we are in front of a new paradigm, and
Yes.
change, things must to change. Even people don't want to change, and I think it's really relevant, and we need to think how we can contribute to this change.
Well, one way we contribute, us old guys, you guys don't look old, but is we can encourage the young to take the risk of not doing business as usual.
Yeah,
because all we're going to be doing is investing in a dead paradigm, and turn them loose and help them.
And I have another question, because, I approach personally to your work in your book about the discourse analysis. And okay, maybe, I don't know, I remember that maybe you focus on verbal discourse. I can't remember really. Yeah. But now, for example, I am working with kids that they are presenting in TikTok or in Instagram. And even yesterday I was checking TikTok, and these people, they were young people, but they were not kids. And they were expressing themselves using image and using music and using the body. And I will want to hear from you about the ideas of the role of image and the role of music in order to share this emotion, because when you are participate, you communicate it, and it's difficult to share an experience if you are not communicating, and for adult people it's very difficult to express themselves. For me, for example, dancing, or I don't know, I think this is part of a new paradigm also.
It is,
absolutely. I don't know.
So remember, we have taken words to be special, like they have definitions, but a word is a picture. It's just if I put up a picture of a tree, you'd say, well, in context, does that mean forest, or the species of the tree, or that tree? You see, a symbol just says, do some work to make this appropriate in this context. And that's what a picture does. So everything is pictures. But see, they're communicating through what some usually call multimodal, although I don't like that term, because what it's really doing is they're communicating multi-sensory. They are saying, why should I use one sense tool, like a word, when I have a billion tools? And I'll put them all together. And what they understand is they're trying to create not individual things, but an ensemble of emotion, feeling, and ideas, right? Imagination. That's what music does. In fact, music is the best example of this theory, because it directly communicates emotion, and it uses a fundamental principle that I didn't have the time, but is in the work. Music is organized around tension and release. right? The good composer makes you, is this going to go, how long will it go? It's going to get louder. Then it releases. That is seminal to human learning and seminal to sensation. Humans love the building tension. It's what I call good stress. And then when it's resolved, you get a reward. Then they seek for another challenge that will be, that music is built around that, but so is human experiencing altogether. So the kids, of course, are catching on better than us because they don't have our semiotic theories of the world. But music, dance, first of all, they're all multi-sensory. But they're also the areas where we academics are uncomfortable because they don't look like they're signs. And by the way, loads of people want to write about music or dance as if it was a set of signifiers. They just can't realize humans don't take in meaning through abstractions. They take in meanings through the entire sensory array of their body, right? Because the imagination powers is the ability to re-experience, to re-sense things, even things you never saw, by combining them, right? So if people say, another way people have put this view is humans think in images. That's slightly wrong. Humans think in the full array of senses. When you imagine yourself scoring a goal in a soccer game, you can hear the crowd, you can sense the excitement of your body. We are sensing in a world the way you are in a video game. And this is the lens. Now, with the kids communicating in that way, you as a teacher, one of your roles is get them meta-aware of it. Make them think about, did this work well? What did I mean? What did this person mean? What are they trying to do to me? Because that then fills up their ability to start imagining new ways or better ways to do.
Okay, me gustaría que hubiera más gente preguntando por el chat, porque la gente no está preguntando y yo tengo
More
libre.
questions.
Bueno, I have another idea that I would want to discuss with you, because it seems to me that you create the idea of affinity space. It seems to me that I was reading the affinity space, and I love that idea, as an alternative to the community, or these ideas of community. You prefer to use the idea of affinity space, because
right.
That is rooted in the meaning, But now it seems to me you are moving away, and you are moving even going farther for the meaning, because the meaning is embodied and right. Is going farther than the mind, I know, I will want to hear from you, because we have this opportunity.
So in affinity spaces, they're where we organize around shared passions, not race, class, and gender. And they therefore allow us to have diversity in a very different way, and then enhance our experiences outside of things like ethnic groups or families or classes and races. And they're a shared way to do work. They are a modern way to organize. They can be, bad guys have them too, by the way. They have wonderful affinity spaces to teach each other how to cheat and steal. So remember, the bad guys and the good guys are in competition
here. We have another question here. This is about the idea of emotional intelligence. If you share this idea of even how we can increase the emotional intelligence in human beings, or if you think this idea is okay, and can we go further and improve
the idea
this
is good, but you can't increase their emotional intelligence with a lecture, because go back. Every human feels emotions, and their emotions are interpretation of how they're feeling now. Why do I feel bad? Why do I feel good? Why is my body doing this? That's first step. Then they have the emotion. Second step is the emotion, given its interpretation, guides what they're going to do. How does it guide it? If it's a bad emotion, it says, get things better. Telling, and I'll assess it. Because if they're not getting better, I'm going to tell you you're not acting right. You're not doing the right thing. And then the third thing is that how I I act of trying to make my anger lower based on what experiences I've had, right? Now, here's where emotional intelligence comes in. If I've had very limited experience of how to deal with anger, I've come from a culture where, you yell, scream, and punch, and that's all I've seen. That is not a very good thing when you're out in an institution, you're out in public, you're out among people, different cultures. So emotional intelligence would give me new experiences of how to use my anger in a different way, right? I'm going to interpret it as anger again, but I'm going to say, wow, this guy showed me a way to use anger as motivating a discussion or motivating different things that don't involve violence, right? That's emotional intelligence. Again, teachers, designers, experience build new experiences so people get new associations and a wider model of them. And by the way, that means since teaching is about changing your web of associations, and remember that web's uses are all driven by emotion, otherwise you wouldn't act at all, then all teaching is about emotional intelligence, all of it.
Okay, thank you so much. And I have here another question that people is putting in the chat. It seems to me this very interesting. We were learning from you that when in relation to literacy, that literacy is maybe related to the idea of a certain consciousness of the process that you are controlling when you are literacy people. In some way you have the control of the discourse that you are using. And people here in the chat is asking if for having this emotional education, you need to be conscious. You need to have a meta-consciousness of this control of your own emotion. Or I don't know, maybe we are confusing about the relationship between
That's
feeling and emotion. I don't know.
No. So look, that's certainly right. The thing is, meta-awareness is very crucial because it lets us see where there are problems and what it will motivate us to want to do something different. But what is meta-awareness? It's imagination. It's playing in your head new scenarios. It's saying, I took that person in the chat to mean X, but now when I imagine it again, he could have meant Y. It's just, see, again, if school is about emotional intelligence, school is about imagination. It's about empowering your imagination. That is this ability to be aware in your head of what's going on. By the way, when you're talking to people, most of it you're totally unaware of. You're on automatic pilot. But see, when something goes wrong, then all of a sudden you begin to, man, what is this guy thinking? Now that you've got that awareness on, which means simulating, imagining, then that's when meta-awareness comes in, where I can use the imagination to play out different scenarios and then try them out in the world, get new experience, and grow. So it's not metacognition. Remember, I'm arguing there is no such thing as cognition. It's the ability to be aware, and the ability to be aware is the ability to imagine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for this idea about imagination, because maybe we forgot in the question the idea of imagination. And we have another question here that is very relevant in this.
Yeah, let me just say one more thing about this. I asked you to simulate a soccer game.
Yeah.
You all could do it. I could do it. I don't understand soccer, bro, but I've seen enough and I've played it. But if you asked me to simulate a cricket game, sport they play in England, I couldn't do it. Why? I've had no experience. I couldn't do it. I literally, so, I'd have to go get some experience in cricket to do it. But that means, of course, I couldn't even be asked to have meta-awareness about cricket.
Okay, this is excellent example, because if we can imagine the play, we can't be conscious of nothing in that way. And the question here is related in some way with that, because she's asking about the affinity space and even imagination. She's asking about how the COVID problem, the virus, the pandemia, in which we are all people sharing these ideas, many ideas coming from the media, how this changed the people mentality and how emotion and cognition is there, and how we can work to do something better for the people and for ourselves in that way, because this is a collective imagination, imagination about the COVID and what we can do there.
So, you know, one thing is we as experienced designers now, teachers are one type. We want to build affinity spaces, but we also want to curate them. So if you're a teacher and you know that a kid's got an interest in something, then you want to be able to say, here are different affinity spaces, and pick the ones that are nurturing, right? That you know, that are good, you know, so some are tough love, but you know about them and send the kid to one that is collective intelligence, not collective harassment, right? But I don't know if you guys, do you get Netflix where you are?
Sorry?
Sure. So there is a documentary called Rabbit People, you know, the bunnies that hop.
Oh, yeah.
Look at Rabbit People. That's an affinity space about people who raise rabbits to take them to shows, fancy rabbits. And you will see that it's an affinity space where people meet in person, digitally, all over. There are people who are fat, thin, black, white, people who are poor, not poor. The only thing they share is passion for rabbits, showing the rabbits. But you will cry. You will cry when you see what it did to the people. People who had wrecked lives, alcoholics or from alcoholic families, or had lost all their jobs, had no dignity. They're in there in the rabbit thing, and their world is expanding, and they all of a sudden have the emotion of joy. So you don't think the rabbit's a big deal, but what was a big deal was sharing a passion with others who designed experiences for you that enhanced your world to make you belong, you matter, and you care. So that's Rabbit People. If we can't do better than rabbits in school by building affinity spaces.
Okay. I think
Jim, I like this idea of the memories about the future, right?
Yes, so wonderful.
And I think that we have overemphasized the importance of the past to understand the human behavior and the human mind, in the psychoanalysis, behaviorism, cognitivism.
There's a lot of good literature now and books even on the fact that the human memory is future oriented. We use memories to prepare for the future and imagine futures. That is why we are very bad at direct. That's why eyewitness testimony is terrible. Humans, every time they use a memory, and they mainly use them to plan the future, change it. Right? Memory for the future changed, the memory is instantiated. So the eyewitness testimony is worthless. We are not creatures of memory, we're creatures of imagination. And memory is a future-oriented in activity. So it's quite literally true. You could have memory from the future. Your future, the one you built.
And what will be the role of the future in a school and in a schooling?
So if schooling is enhancing the experience base to build the person's model of the world wider, then you have built their capacity to imagine the future wider. And if they can imagine it, they can use those skills collectively with if you network them with other people well to build that future. There's no point in putting them in school and saying, God, you just passed the past. You know all about the past. There's only 20 years. If we don't do something about climate change, there's only 20 years left. So, you know, it's all about the future. There's no past left. Now, I'm not by any means saying you shouldn't study history, but you should study history as asking, why did this happen? What are alternative ways to think about it? And what will it teach me about a better future?
And maybe here the key point is that the school and the schooling doesn't foster deep learning, maybe. Yeah. So when we are playing, we actually involve our body, our heart, our passion, our cognitions. But in schooling and the university, we just cut our hands.
Humans. So you know something depending on how strongly it is in your neural connections. Some connections are weak, some you don't even build. Some are very, very strong. The connections that are strongest were the ones where the experiences were emotionally charged, where something was at stake, something mattered. Nobody learns anything deeply in the sense of integrating it with their web of associations and keeping it unless during that learning it had an effectual charge. It meant something to them at the level of caring. Otherwise, it's very superficial. And because school doesn't care about this, you know, all the evidence is that after you're out of school, it lasts at most what you learn 6 months.
Yeah.
Right. Drops right out of your head because it didn't have any. Now, the experiences you had as a child with your parents never drop out of your head. They were so emotionally charged. They're in there forever. But not school.
No.
Except some of the bad experiences people remember. Now, there are some very good teachers and very good schooling. I'm talking about the system as a whole, but there are some people who do this very, very, very well.
Sure.
Sometimes they have to close their door and do it.
We have more questions. One is from Dana Walker. She said, cool, Jim, elaborate on developing a collective imagination, the process and how it can be achieved in order to bring about change.
Okay, so there's a good amount of new literature as well on collective intelligence, they call it. And the interesting thing in this literature is mainly about how do you get groups to be smarter than the smartest person in them, not dumber than the dumbest person in them. And this literature shows, it's a wisdom of the crowd literature as well, that there are a couple of features that are crucial. One is you must have in the group diversity. And diversity does not mean race, class, and gender. It means diversity of life experiences. Right? Not at the next level down. Not that you're Black, but what experiences did you have that we didn't as an individual? And that's because to be collectively intelligent, each of us has a limited model of the world. So if you've had very different experiences than me, you have a very different model. So now we're going to be able to pool that. It's crucial. And the other thing is you have to be able imaginatively to take the perspective of other people. Those are the two crucial things. Now, in small groups, when you're talking about small groups being intelligent, the literature has found that a small group to be collectively intelligent, the best thing is to make it all women. Any man up from one, it lowers the collective intelligence group. The reason for that is that women are better at taking other people's perspective than men are. Now, you can train men to do it. So the point is, you would want to get shared passion, like an infinity space, but you'd want to ensure you have genuine diversity, not the liberal diversity of race, class, and gender, or the echo chamber of right-wingers. That is, people with different lived experiences. They might be the same color, they might not, but, and you want people who are capable of imagining, role-playing other people's positions. And you get that and the shared passion, because that's a shared emotion that makes you work, it makes you keep in the box. Then you have collective intelligence. Sounds easy, doesn't it? But it's very hard. So one thing, by the way, being that you could probably produce babies in test tubes, and we don't really need any more people, we should just eradicate all men, and then the world would be a much better place. I don't have any takers for that, I could see.
I have another question here that some people is asking, and also some people raise the hand, and the technician can give the voice, but in the time they do, the question is very interesting for me. is how you can develop this emotion and this imagination in digital space without these people, without contributing to addiction. I don't like the idea of addiction, but you know, this is very popular.
I do,
And maybe the question is how you can develop in digital space this emotion or imagination.
So I was trying to plug my thing in. Look, I mean, addiction is always somebody has a problem and they find a way to solve it that isn't really working, but does work well enough to make them happy. So you got to find the problem they were trying to solve is solve the problem a better way. The thing about any media, remember, the bad guys are good at this. So don't sit around and say, oh, video games are bad or they're addictive. Say, I don't want my kid playing games made by the bad guys. And see, the other thing is parents don't usually realize the video game industry is way bigger than all the big ads you see for AAA games, right? There's there's an independent industry and all sorts of games that if the parents saw them, they say, wow, that's amazing. Play Flower. Just go play Flower at the game. And then you'll change your view of what a video game is. So remember, video games are a technology. Books are a technology. And they can be bad or good. Now, by the way, books have done infinitely more harm than video games, right? Nobody has went on a crusade because a book told them to go kill people. I mean, because a video game told them, but they have for books. People have read books in a way that told them to kill people, the Bible, the Turner's Diaries, right-wing stuff, and gone out and killed people in droves, hundreds of millions through history. The number of people killed because somebody played a video game might be up to 5, I don't know, maybe 6. But the number of people killed by books is into the hundreds of millions in human history, right? So a book is a far more powerful mechanism so far than video game, partly because loads of people around the world think God wrote a book. They just don't agree which one he wrote. But no one yet thinks God designed a video game. And let's hope they never do. So don't treat video games as separate from books and movies. Use all technologies to create experience. Meld them, match them. But you're the designer. If you're a teacher or a parent, you're designing experiences, and therefore you're going to look. But look with some awareness that you may be prejudiced in ways because you haven't seen any of the games that aren't about killing.
I love this idea, but it's very complicated to translate to the parents and to the teacher. And maybe we can, speaking in the desert, I don't know.
Well, you show people, I mean, get in a small group and get a few teachers and parents and show them the enormous number of very compelling games. Show them Minecraft. Show them kids playing Minecraft. It's so complicated. And what the kids do in building it, the parent, I guarantee they come out of it and they say, whoa, he's going to pay for my retirement. I'm not touching those video games. But do it in little groups.
Yeah, it's what we do. Thanks so much, because you are encouraging us. Yeah. And Beatriz Falero have the voice now, because it take a while. Please, Beatriz, you can speak if you want to, Jim. They did a connection.
I don't know, my cord, technology. The cord isn't working. I don't know. I'm about to run out of power anyway, despite the fact that I'm in an electric socket. Remember, you got to keep in mind, you people in Spain, you remember the old America. America is now a third world country.
You think?
Yeah,
North America?
America has the highest levels of inequality in the world. Not the highest. It's so far off the chart, you couldn't even put it on the chart. We are below every one of your countries, significantly below social mobility. You have more social upward mobility than we do. We have more inequality. By the way, the literature on inequality that high levels of inequality in a society, I mean, you have them too, but nothing like ours, they give rise to everybody in the society being less healthy than in a more egalitarian, everybody, rich and poor. And we have medical system that's just destroying everything because we have so many sick people. So we're a third world country. Do come and visit Sedona, but stay in Spain.
You know,
you're a modern country.
You know, we were speaking before in the other talk. I don't know, but I am convinced about that. Is that economical powers are behind? And you know, in this kind, if you are watching the vaccines and what is happening now with the vaccine in Africa is just 1%, and in America is 50%. I think this is really sad, but it's difficult to change, and maybe with a small words we can change a little bit. But we need to be conscious that economical powers are behind that, and we need to speak about that freely.
Well, so let me, and I've got to leave because I'm going to lose. Let me say a last thing that about that, because it's an important point. Today's capitalism is what people call a casino capitalism. All versions of capitalism have been based on production, right? Consumption and production. Every theory of economy, from Ricardo and Smith on to Marx, every theory of economy is about the relationship between production and consumption. The economy in modern countries, especially America, but in many, no longer is tied to production and consumption at all. It's tied to bets that very rich people make on stock prices and derivatives, other financial interests. That is, and we know this because throughout the entire history of capitalism, there has been a correlation between worker pay and worker productivity. That is, the more productive the workers get, the more we pay them. And that broke about 2 decades ago. There is no correlation between worker productivity and pay. So we don't have an economy. Marx, Ricardo, Smith, if you told them there's an economy that is not sensitive to production or consumption, but only on bets, and where the bets have nothing to do with produce, like even if I'm betting on a stock price of a shoe company, I don't care how good the shoes are. I just care whether the thing goes up. So Marx would say, and non-Marxist economists would say, that's not an economy. I have no idea what it is. So the real issue here is, and that's why we have this inequality, right? Because only the people owning the casino can get ahead. But we've never seen this. We don't have any theory at all what it would mean that you have an economy where you produce and consume, but it has no correlation with how the wealth is circulating in society. It's brand new. It's good. We're in a casino. It's kind of an end times thing, but that means people who care about this have got to get off of old theories and begin to theorize what it means to have an economy run by 1% of the people who are just in their own little private casino, using our money, by the way, to make the bets. Don't try to solve the world all at once.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Keep in mind that if you change the mental model of one person for the better, that mental model is their model of the world, so you utterly change their world.
Okay, thank you. This is the best
All right, thanks a lot. I look forward to seeing you drinking your wine.
It was
thank
wonderful.
you so much, Jim.
Thank you so much, Jim. We will be in touch, and we hope to meet in reality.
Yes,
thank you. Thank
Bye.
you, everyone, for participating. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.